Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors' residences.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing, and the senior living industry.
And I'm Corrie, a clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, Claire Nelson fell 25 feet while hiking solo at Joshua National Park. She broke her pelvis in the fall, which left her immobilized for 4 days in the hot California sun. We're going to hear from Claire and her incredible story of survival. Corrie, I wanted to just ask you, have you ventured out to a restaurant yet?
Well, it's funny that you asked me because I hadn't for 15 months. And then for our anniversary in June, that was our first experience. And I must say it was a little weird, but it was nice. And then, of course, I went away for those few weeks, and all of a sudden I was going to restaurants, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it was very strange. What about you?
Yeah, I guess you were going back to normal. You know what? No, I haven't been. In fact, tonight I'm going to be taking Stephanie, my wife. It's her birthday today. Happy birthday, Stephanie. And we're going out to a restaurant for the first time. It'll be on a terrace, and boy, oh boy, the weather's cooperating. What a spectacular Saturday afternoon here. So looking forward to our first restaurant outing in a long time, Corrie.
Happy birthday, Steph, and I'm sure it's going to be lovely.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait.
No doubt.
What do we have coming up on the second half?
On the second half, we're going to the dentist. Well, not exactly, but let's face it, for many of us, going to the dentist can be very anxious, and particularly for children. Add the dynamic of special needs, and it can be downright traumatizing. So we're going to be talking with someone who actually specializes in making this experience more enjoyable and less stressful for children and their parents. That's all coming up after the 3:30 news.
Yeah, should be quite interesting for that. All right. In 2018, Claire Nelson was in her 30s and she was beginning to burn out. Her hectic London, and we're talking London, England, life of work and social activity and striving to do more and do better in the big city was frenetic and stressful. When the anxiety she felt finally brought her to the breaking point, Claire decided to take some time off and travel to Joshua Tree National Park in Southern California to hike and clear her head. What happened next was something she could never have anticipated. While hiking, Claire fell 25 feet, gravely injuring herself, and she lay alone in the desert, mistakenly miles off any trail, without a cell phone signal, fighting for her life. She lay in the elements for 4 days until she was miraculously found. Her rescuers had not expected to find her alive. In her recent published book, Things I Learned from Falling, Claire tells her incredible story and what it taught her about loneliness, anxiety, and the transformation and how to survive it all. Well, we have Claire on the line. Claire, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. And you are calling, just for our listeners, are you just in London, England now, or just outside?
I am in the center of London, England.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for taking some time to tell your incredible story. So there you are at Joshua National Park, not far from Palm Springs, California, trying to get out of the rat race. You've just had it. And tell me how the day started at the beginning of the hike.
Well, it was, as these things tend to begin, it was an uneventful, normal kind of a day. It was a beautiful, hot day in the desert, as it was every day that I was in the desert. And I was really looking forward to this hike because I'd been doing lots of shorter hikes. This was kind of the bigger one. It was a full day. It would be a drive right across to the southern side of the national park. And it would be a 7 to 8 mile in and out hike. So I was excited. I was raring to go.
So here you are, Claire, an experienced hiker. You're not, as far as I understand, a huge risk taker. So can you bring us to the moment when you started to test, like the footing started to, I guess, give way on some of the boulders?
Yeah, I mean, I'd come to this point in the hike, and I knew there would be some scrambling because I checked in with the ranger beforehand. So when I came to this stack of boulders and I climbed to the top of that, it was nothing. I didn't think anything of it, but I had to get across the other side in order to get down and back on what I thought at the time was the trail. So I'm pressing my foot into this rock just to check that I can put my weight into it. And, for a good few goes of pushing my foot into it, I really felt like it was going to hold me until, at the very crucial last moment, it became, my foot gave way and I started to slide. And in that moment, it was just no way I was going to be able to stop.
Oh, my goodness. Listen to Life Unrehearsed here with Matt and Corrie, and that's the voice of Claire Nelson. She survived 3 nights and 4 days with a broken pelvis after falling 25 feet into a hole during a hiking trip in California. So here you are, you're in midair now, and can't imagine falling 25 feet. You're in this hole, and you can't really move because you have a broken pelvis. Are you realizing at this point the gravity of the situation? Like, what's going through your mind knowing you're alone? And I might add, you don't have any cell phone service here.
Yeah, in that moment, when you do hike often, you know what can happen to people, right? And I think when you get so comfortable doing something enough, you stop feeling the risk, which therefore you stop thinking that this happened to you. So when I realized all of these elements that were against me, not only was I very aware of how dire the situation was, but what that could mean, that I could die there, and there was a lot of anger at myself because I realized immediately that I haven't done what I was supposed to do to keep myself safe should something like this happen. And there was this immediate response of, oh my gosh, I'm so mad at myself. I'm so angry.
I'm mad. I'm sure there was a plethora of emotions that you experienced. 3 nights, 4 days, immobilized in this hole with a broken pelvis. So there had to be tremendous physical and mental pain that you've experienced. This is what I want to know. What did you do to survive?
It's funny what your mind will do and what we know is survival mode, right? Like you kind of become very fixated on anything that will get you out of the situation that you're in. This is my experience anyway of my own survival instinct kicking in, and my brain is just kind of constantly it's blocking out all the stuff it doesn't need, and just really kind of digging deep into any little pieces of information that I might have gathered throughout my lifetime that could be useful, constantly trying to come up with new ideas. So it kind of keeps you busy, and there's all that adrenaline constantly of battling the things that are against you, which in my case was, the heat, the sort of the limitations on how much water I had, fear, of course, as well. And so, you kind of end up staying busy by just going straight into survival mode.
And here you are, Claire, the hours, I must have started as hours, and then all of a sudden hours become days. Is there a certain point where you thought, this is it, this is the end?
Yeah. It was something I knew the reality straight away, but it wasn't until the third night that I kind of reached the point of acceptance of going, okay, I can't keep fighting this, and it's time that I just made peace with the fact that this is where I'm going to die, and maybe that's not, in the big scheme of things, that there are worse places to be, and it was a very unforgettably peaceful moment.
Wow. So did you have this sort of reflective moment, I imagine, where you go through this mental list in your head? That's what I'm thinking. You go through this mental list in your head about all the just reflection of life prior to.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's it's such a cliche, but it's true. Like you look back over your life and you sort of do a sort of an assessment, and you think, well, there was a combination of looking back at really tiny, minuscule moments and memories and thinking, wow, when I die, they're going to have accounted for nothing. Like they're just gone, and then it's like they never happened. And at the same time, going kind of assessing and thinking, I wish, what do I wish I could have done differently, and what could I have done better, and what am I proud of? And yeah, it's real. It's a big retrospective.
I was talking with Claire Nelson about her harrowing fall. And of course, you can't move. You've got a broken pelvis. There's just the physical side of things. And is there something, I mean, besides screaming, did you do something to try to attract? What were you trying to do? Just, you're at, this is it. This is the end. I have to do something to try to save myself. Was there anything you did to try to attract rescuers, considering you had no cell phone service?
Oh, I mean, I was out of options. Screaming was pretty much all I had. So it really became, I knew that my only chance of getting out of there was to stay alive long enough that someone would send out a search and rescue. And so it kind of became, I did things like I made a sunshade out of my hiking stick to keep the heat and the sun off me, to stop myself from getting burnt. I had to kind of conserve urine, when I knew my water was going to run out. So it just really became, my main goal was stay alive long enough that someone will notice you're missing, and send for help.
And of course, social media, you were going through some thoughts about social media, how that was so engaging for you and maybe took control. And ironically, it was social media that may have saved your life, as since there was no correspondence, a search and rescue team went out. So this is day 4 now, we have to head out to a traffic break here, Claire. However, when the rescuers find you, I'd love to hear what emotions you were going through as you started to hear some people above.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Fleur-Lee Senior Residences. Always there for you. Safe, reassuring, and comforting. We call it home.
And we're talking to Claire Nelson, who survived 3 nights and 4 days with a broken pelvis after falling 25 feet in a hole during a hiking trip at California National Park. Claire, even reading it is overwhelming. Day 4, rescuers find you. We want to hear, what are the emotions that went through your mind as you started to hear people from above?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the fact that I heard a helicopter going over, I wasn't even sure if they were looking for me. It was just this moment of having reached my lowest ebb to suddenly massive adrenaline and just this thought of, this is my chance to live. And then thinking, how are they going to see me? Because I'm in this hole, and they have to really come right over the top of me, and I'm a mile off the trail. So, kind of sort of trying to get to grips with the reality of it. But boy, that was a moment where I just thought everything can change if everything just goes right.
And from what I understand, Claire, I guess the helicopter passed by you a couple times without noticing, and then they circled back and saw a little flash of something. So my goodness. And so here you are, you're taken out of the park. I would imagine, I understand you needed surgery right away. Is that how what had to for the recovery process? I
needed surgery on my pelvis to put the bones back together, basically.
It's just incredible. Now, I understand, Claire, that this was, in 2018, and I understand that you went back to Joshua National Park, I think, a year later, didn't you? What was that experience like?
That's right. That was something I was so determined to go back and finish the hike, and, I fell in love with the desert, so for me it was, I wanted to go back, I wanted to be there, and also just to sort of show that this wasn't going to stop me from living my life. So it was a really emotional hike, and I went with friends, and wow, it was a really, I describe the book as like a sliding doors moment, because on the one hand, I was walking on this trail, and I was, standing on my own 2 feet, whereas imagining myself a couple of miles further into the desert, lying there, and how different everything could have been.
Well, you're gutsy. Let me tell you something. You are one gutsy lady. Right? It's so impressive. I actually want to go back to this moment. So you get rescued, you get your surgery. What was it like reuniting with people? Because you imagine you thought you'd never see them again.
Yeah. It was wonderful, because I think too it was not even just seeing people again, but I had been living in this really solitary, kind of lone, solo existence for so long, which I know, and I've sort of since come to understand is very much a fear-driven thing to do. So then being reunited with people, it was like, oh wow, I actually had so many people in my life, and immediately wanting to connect better with them now that I was able to, be alive and still have my relationships with people.
No question.
No, amazing. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt and Corrie, and that's the voice of Claire Nelson, who survived 3 nights, 4 days. She fell, broke her pelvis. She was in a hole and got rescued, as you've just heard. Earlier on, Claire, you mentioned you weren't pleased with yourself with some of the things you were supposed to do. So any words of advice for aspiring hikers out there of what you should be doing before you go out there?
Oh, yeah. I love to be a cautionary tale. Like, this is my responsibility now. It's just, number one thing, because I love solo hiking, and I'm one of the people I stand by the power of and enjoyment of a solo hike. But tell someone where you're going, when to expect you back. Even if you think, I do this all the time, it doesn't matter. Like, it happens to absolutely anyone, and it can be on even a small hike. It'll be the most important step you ever take. And take plenty of water. I think it's an easy thing. I know people who it's easy to not carry too much water, but that can save your life as well.
Oh, yes. And I think you even had to survive on your own urine, from what I understand. And this was just what you had to do to survive. You wrote this book, which is just recently published, called Things I Learned from Falling. It was published by HarperCollins. Great book. Tell us, what made you write this book?
Well, I am a writer, so it is sort of in my natural instinct that I wanted to write about this, even if it was just for me. And but there were so many people, even complete strangers who had read the story, saying, "Oh, this should be a book. I'd love to read the book." And and so I thought, well, I'm going to start writing down this experience, and then the things around it in my life in London was something that I'd wanted to write about for a while, and maybe share it so that other people can realize that they're not alone. And the two stories actually have so many parallels that it just sort of came together quite naturally.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because this is much more than a story of survival, Claire. In your book, you talk about this is a life experience, and we mentioned social media, and perhaps like many, many people, particularly in a pandemic, social media has dominated their lives, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been really testing all of our relationships with social media in this pandemic, but it is an incredible tool. It's just that it's so easy for it to sort of be used as a crutch for different things, and then in a way that after a while everything falls out of balance, and it's really hard to kind of sort of check in with ourselves and notice when that's happening.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, so ironic that it was really due to social media and your lack of presence on it that probably saved your life. So incredible. Claire, we really appreciate you coming on the show, and remind listeners you're calling from London, England, and I'm sure it must bring back a whole bunch of emotions every time you have to do these interviews, but it's a heck of a book. It's called Things I Learned from Falling, and as mentioned, just not a survival story, but a life story. And I guess any last words of advice to our listeners out there, Claire, that you can give?
Don't be afraid to ask for help in your life, no matter what it is. Whether it's basic survival stuff in the outdoors, or just in your day-to-day life. That's how we connect with each other. It's a form of survival.
So true. And I think as we're slowly opening up with this pandemic, we're starting to see that human connection a little bit more and more. Very well said. Well, that's Claire Nelson. Claire, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Best of luck. It's Claire Nelson, just published her book called Things I Learned from Falling. And you can pick that up anywhere. It's published by HarperCollins. Go get yourself a copy online or at your nearest bookstore. All right. Coming up on Life Unrehearsed, making the trip to the dentist less stressful for children with special needs. This is certainly dear to my heart. And parents, you're going to want to listen up. That's going to be coming up after the 3:30 news.